Hi. So in this video, let us start working on our third project. This project is going to be an interactive toy of sorts. Really, it's going to be a interactive experience where there's no like win or loss. We're not like getting points or anything. It's just going to be a fun little interactive toy with some of the main things we're trying to learn here: the use of arrays and lists, and as well, look at some more UI interactions. Unity's UI, the base UI, just has more stuff in it that we can take a look at, buttons, sliders. So we're going to take a look at those things. And instead of putting this in like a game form, let's just make it an interactive toy where we can click around the UI and have things happen. The specific toy kind of thing I'm going to be making, as an example, well, it's going to be a sticker book. We're going to have a little we're gonna have like a background of paper, and then we can open up our UI. We'll have a bunch of stickers in there. We can click a sticker, and we can add it to the page. We can change the size of the sticker. We can rotate the sticker. When we click, it places it. Then we can open up the panel again, place another sticker, and we can just kind of place stickers on, top of each other and have like a little sticker book. So that is the goal, and we're going to build up to that over the next few videos. In this one, let us just kind of set up the stage, set up the scene, and then let's take a simple look at a script that lets us kind of play around with Unity's UI features. So to start, what I have currently in this project are some sprites. I have a canvas here, but I'm going to delete that. I have some sprites here, just some stickers, stickers of cats. They're really just PNGs. Some ducks here. We got a star, and these are going to be the stickers in our sticker book that our users can click on and place them into the scene. I also have this background. This background is definitely in the wrong orientation. We wanted like a wider background, but it doesn't matter for illustration purposes. But it's like a paper textured background. So I want this to be set up very similar to our previous project, because this one is also going to be in 2D. I'm going to make sure our main camera is in orthographic. If it was in perspective, we just want to put it in orthographic. And I want to put this background in here. I'm going to set it to 000. Rename it to background. And just like the last project, I'm going to use the scalar script that we have just to kind of scale the background. Just still use that same kind of solution for this. And I think for this project, it's fine. So we have this script here. And when I hit play, you'll see, in this case, it's going to zoom out and fit it. It's going to look a little crunched here just because it is, it's not in the right aspect ratio. This picture is taller than it is wide, so it's going to look a little weird here. And the other thing is the main camera starts at a height of 1, which is we saw the top part cut off. If I change that to 0 and hit play, it should look fine. And there you go. And so similar to how when we set up our 2D game, if you remember, we had our background. When we had objects, for example, to make sure that the sticker or our player in the previous one was always rendering on top of the background, all we did was we changed the Z value to be a little closer to the camera, right? So this can become kind of problematic in our sticker book application, because if you think about it, when I place a sticker, in real life, if I place a sticker and then I place another sticker, that second sticker should go on top of the first one. So in this case, again, if I had this other sticker and I placed it, I'd wanted Z to be more like -2, just so that I can guarantee, let's just see them overlapping, just so I can guarantee that this duck sticker is on top of this cat sticker, right? And let us also just make it smaller while we're at it. It looks like it's, there you go. Okay. Just so that we can, it's going to always render on top. Now imagine I start adding more and more and more stickers. At some point, if we just keep subtracting the Z value, we're going to go past the camera where we're not going to see the sticker anymore, right? And obviously there's solutions to this. We could move the camera really far back so we won't conceivably hit it. We could put a limit on the number of stickers we're going to have, which is something we are going to do, but not for this reason. um, we could, I'm having it jump by 1 over here. We could have it maybe jump by just a 0.1, so we get a lot more like granularity in that movement. Another thing we can do, instead of just using the z value as is, Unity has something called a sorting group. This is only for 2D objects. But if we add the sorting group component, let me add it both to this duck and the cat. The sorting group has something called order in layer. We can give it different sorting layers, and each layer can have its own order. So higher numbers means that it's going to be in front. For example, right now, this duck is in front of this cat, right? This duck is closer to the camera, and that is what we see here. However, if I change the order in layer on the cat to 1, because the duck is in 0, the cat's in 1, so the cat's higher than the duck, we can see that the cat's rendering on top of the duck. So when Unity is going, when it's doing its render cycle, it'll look at this sorting group to see which things it should render before other things. And this is great because this way we can have, 1,000 stickers, put them all in z equals -1, and just keep adding to this sorting group. So we're never going to get closer to the camera, but Unity will know which sprite to render on top of the other. So for now, let's just delete these. And all I've done here is with these sprites, I've made them sprites, or I've changed the texture type to sprite, set the sprite mode to single, and then I've gone ahead and then just resaved them, dragged them all into the scene and put them back in here as prefabs, just to save us a little bit of setup, something we should be familiar with. So I've just gone ahead and done that. Okay, so to continue, we have our background now. What I'm going to work on in this video as part of setup is create some UI. So what I want in my UI is a few things. I want a button that's going to open up a panel, and that panel, we can call it a panel, we can call it an overlay, but this panel, this a box that's going to open up, will contain all the stickers that I have. It should also contain a little X button, like a close button, so we can click it and it closes. We are going to have a slider on the screen to change the scale of our sticker, and we are going to have an eraser button that we can click on, and we can remove the stickers, right? When we click on the stickers, it should erase them. We're not going to be implementing everything in this video. We're just going to implement, we're just going to create the UI, and we're going to just implement one of the buttons that open and closes the panel so we can see the stickers and we can close out of it. And then in subsequent videos, we'll kind of start implementing everything else. Okay, so to start, I'm going to right click, new UI object, and I'm just going to make a button. You can see there's button dash text mesh pro. Again, we don't want to go to legacy button, just like we had legacy text before. We don't want to use the legacy button. We want to use a text mesh pro button. There's a new project. It's going to ask me about importing the text mesh pro assets. I'm just going to do that. And we have our button here. So the button, just like our score from the previous project, is on this giant canvas here, and I can see that here. So if we just look at the makeup of a button, all a button is a game object with an image. That is this gray background on the button. That is that image. If I change the color, we can see the button color is changing. And it has a button component. This button component is going to let us do a few things. One of those things is we can change the colors of it as we interact with it. We can see there's a normal color, a highlighted color, a pressed color, selected color, disabled color. So, for example, if I change the highlighted color to red and the pressed color to just like black, and we hit play, we will see that when I hover over it, it turns red. That's what the highlighted color was. And when I click it, it turns black. That's what the selected color was. There's also other things like disabled color. Oh, I'm sorry, that's what pressed color was when I clicked it. But we also have things like selected color and disabled color. These are things that we could use, in when we're in code. We can set our button to be disabled, enabled. If we set it to disabled, it'll automatically change the color to match this. For now, I'm just going to Control Z and reset all of this. And another quick thing is I know that the image has a color and the button has a color. I believe as you set both of them, it kind of multiplies the colors together. So like if I set this to kind of a red and then I set this to blue, we're just going to see that it gets like purple and then just starts getting darker. But really, you just want to control one of these. So if you want to change your button, you can just change the normal color or you can just change the image's color. So we have our button here. And I want the button to be on this bottom left of the screen. So I'm going to make sure to anchor it there. And then just move it a little bit so, there's a little bit of space between it and the end of the screen. I'm going to rename my button to BTN underscore, I'll call this sticker panel. Because this button is going to open up the sticker panel. Next, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add the slider that's going to control the scale of our sticker. And we will go to slider. I'm just going to increase the width of the slider so it takes up a little bit more of the screen. The slider is going to be pinned to the bottom middle of the screen, and I'm just going to move it up to give it some padding. And the only thing I don't like about the slider is this circle is too small. So let's just take a look at the makeup of a slider, right? The slider is a game object with a slider component. And there's things underneath it, right? We have a background. That's going to be the background fill. Again, we can change that to see what it is. It's the background of the slider itself. It's got a fill area. And it's got the handle area. So this is like the little circle here. That's the handle. And I'm just going to increase the scale of it. Oh. Actually, within the handle area, we have a handle and we want to increase the size of that. So just increase it by a little bit. And I think that's just easier to use. It's a little bigger, a little easier to click on. And I forgot to mention this same, even with the button, if we click this drop down, the button has a text on it, and that is the text that here says button. So if I change that to sticker, I'll just say stickers, you can see it changes there. I'm also going to make my button kind of square. Maybe we'll make it smaller. And then finally, the last button that I want to add is going to be that the erase button. And for now, I'm just going to copy this button. I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to pin it to the other side. Again, give it a little bit of padding. I'll make this one a little smaller. And I'll change the text to erase. And finally, the last little bit of the UI that I want, also I'm going to rename this button to button underscore erase. The last little thing I want is that overlay screen, right? That panel that we're going to have that has all the stickers. I want to have that. So I'm going to right click on the canvas, UI, and we want to make a panel. A panel is just kind of it's just a component that we can use to hold other components, and it usually contains a background. If we look at what was created when I made this panel, all it is a game object with an image. That's all it is. It's kind of just used to hold things within it. Oftentimes also in UI, if you want to kind of house things, like have a hierarchy and use have like a nested object, you could just use a panel and then just remove the image component. It's just an empty game object with a rect transform. The panel just happens to come with an image, which is good for us because we want a background for this. So this panel will stretch across the image. Or actually, we will just have it be centered, and I will just make it a small kind of square for now. So our panel would look like that. We can even give it a little bit more opacity so that we can't quite see through it. And this panel needs to now contain two things. It's got to contain all the stickers I have, which are all these prefab images, and it needs to contain a button to close it. So let's add that button first. I'm going to go to UI, add a button. The button's text is just going to be a big X, and we'll reduce the button's width to kind of match that. This is going to be anchored on the top right of the screen, and then give it a little padding. I'll call it btn underscore close. Now the next thing we need is those images or sprites, right? So all the sprites that we can pick from. We can't just drag these sprites in here because it doesn't matter if, so I just drag the sprite into the scene. Even though the sprite is a child of the canvas, this sprite has a transform component, not a rect transform as what should be on a canvas should have. So we can't just directly use it like this. All we need to do really is just make a new UI component of type image, and then we can set that image to be our sticker. And you can see this one has a rect transform. So when we drag it out here, it comes in with a sprite renderer. That's a different component. We need to be able to use it within the UI, we need to use an image component. So I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to duplicate it a few times. And then just kind of drag it around and set it up. Okay, and so all I've done is I duplicated the image a bunch of times, and then I changed the source of the image to be each one of these sprites here. Now, this has been set up kind of visually, right? I wanted a nice little grid here, and I've set it up visually. I'm sure if we looked at this carefully, you can see that the spacing between these items is not even. We could go in here and, we could like use just a little bit of math and keep adding the same amount of X and Y to each thing so they are aligned in a grid. But what's going to happen when I have a new image? I'm going to have to make a duplicate of this, come here, and I'm going to have to position it manually. Or, even better yet, what if later on in my sticker app, I let users upload their own pictures? They should be able to do it from within the app, and it's got to auto organize things. And so there's like an easy way for us to organize things within Unity's UI system. What I'm going to do is make a new panel, and I'm going to remove the image from this panel. And this panel is going to stretch. And I have made a tiny mistake here. I'm going to delete this panel. I have made all my images a child of the close button. Really, I want them to be a child of the panel and not the close button. Within the panel itself, I'm going to make a new panel, and it's going to be set to stretch. We are just going to remove the image component, so it is an empty panel. And we have a few options for organizing things. There's three basic ones, really. There are vertical layout groups, there's horizontal layout groups, and there's what's known as a grid layout group. Vertical layout groups will space things vertically. Horizontal layout groups space things horizontally, and a grid layout lets you do both at the same time. This specific sticker thing here is a grid, right? It has horizontal spacing. We have spacing between this, and this. And then there's vertical spacing between this first row and their second row. There's going to be even spacing. So for our case, we are going to use a grid layout. I'm going to add this component in, and you'll see that there's some options here. But really, first thing I need to do is take all of my images and then just child them to it. And you can see as soon as I've childed them to it, they all move, and I cannot control the position of these images manually anymore. It's all going to be controlled by the options in the grid layout group. So for example, we have spacing on the X and the Y. You can see as I increase it, it increases the spacing evenly on the X. And same with the Y, right? It increases the spacing evenly on the Y. Let's make that 10, and let's make this 10. We can choose what's the starting corner, if we want the lower left, lower right, so we can choose where it starts from. We can choose which axis we want to start on, either vertical or horizontal. We can change the alignment of everything. In this case, I'm going to keep it to middle center because I want them aligned in the middle. And we can change how it's constrained. In this case, I want a fixed number of columns. And I want 4 columns. So you could see it does 1 column, 2 column, 3 column, 4 column, and then it starts a new row. So it's never going to go beyond 4 columns. We can also constrain it by rows if we want to. And so now, if I ever have more stickers or I have a feature where we can upload our own images, you can see that it's just going to automatically start laying this out for us. Now, in this case, my experience is just going to have a finite amount of stickers. But again, this just makes that layout part easy, right? I can always change the spacing if I find it too little. And everything is evenly spaced. That's the nice part. All right, for the last little bit of this, what we are going to do is just get the panel working. So we have this sticker panel here. Really, it shouldn't always be active, right? I want the sticker panel to close and open as I use it. Actually, even before we do that, I'm going to change the name of these objects to sticker. And I'm going to give this a button component as well, so that we can actually click on these stickers. And the nice thing is with this button component, you will see if I hit play, when I hover over my stickers, they have those effects. So they have now effectively become buttons. All right, so that's like the setup. Let's just write a small script to open and close this panel, as well as just take a look at how this slider would potentially work. So we get a kind of understanding of Unity's UI system and how we write scripts using it. So I'm going to go into the scripts folder and make a new mono behavior script that I will call overlay controller. And the main purpose of this script is to control this overlay opening and closing. We don't need an update for this script. So let's start with the references that we need. I'm going to make a bunch of serialized fields. We'll have one that's going to be the game object. That's going to be the overlay itself. I'll call this sticker overlay. We are going to have another one that's going to be of type button. And this one is going to be the open button. And then we'll just have another one for the close button. First thing, kind of main thing that we want to do is that on start, we want to make sure the sticker overlay is turned off. So we are just going to have the sticker overlay dot set active be false. Now, a really good coding practice here is imagine that we didn't set the serialized field. We hit play. And it's going to be like trying to set something null to false, right? This isn't going to be set. It's going to give us an error. So instead, a kind of good coding practice is, because I don't want it to crash here. In fact, if this isn't set and it doesn't close, I still kind of want the rest of my program to run. I'm just going to check if sticker overlay is equal to null. I'm sorry, is not equal to null. So if it's set, only if it's set it to false. Otherwise, just kind of continue executing the program. We'll probably realize that it isn't closed, and we can set it there. It doesn't need to stop running and give us an error. The other thing is your button might be highlighted like this, like it doesn't recognize it. We need to make sure to use Unity engine.ui. So we have to use the UI module. So now Let's just set this up and see this setting to false on start. So on the canvas, I'm going to add the overlay controller. Make sure I set these three objects. The button for the sticker panel is going to be the open button. Within the panel, we have button close, and then the sticker overlay, which I will just call this sticker overlay, is going to be the sticker overlay here. When I hit play, you can see it's set to false. All right, now let's deal with opening it up using this stickers button. There are two primary ways that we can kind of influence buttons running functions, right? Really what I want is when I hit the sticker button, I want to run a function that sets this panel to true. When I hit this X button, I want to run a function that sets this panel to false. So there's two kind of main ways of doing that, and we'll take a look at both. One of them is going to be purely in script. We have a reference to this open button. So I'm just going to start by making a new function, call it open panel. And all this panel is going to do is do sticker overlay dot set active to true. And so we can take our open button, and our open button, we want something to happen when we click on it, right? It has what we call an event. And an event runs when something happens. In this case, when I click the button, it's going to run an event. That event is called onClick. We can add things called listeners to events. And all a listener does, so if I add listener, and what's the listener I'm going to add? It's going to be open panel. And what this means is that open panel is now listening to this onClick event. So when I click that button, open panel would be like, oh, onClick was run, right? OnClick was run because we clicked on the button. I'm going to run this function. So all this line says is that every time we click this button, we have added a function to listen to it, which is open panel, which is going to run when we click that. You can add as many listeners as you want to an event. In this case, we just need the one. So in the same vein, I'm going to make a new function, and to show us the other way for closing the panel, I will make this a public function, so public close panel. And it needs to be void. And all this one is going to do is going to do sticker overlay set active to false. Now I made this public so we can do this in the inspector rather than doing it in code. So I'll go back to my Unity and I will select button close. And when I scroll into the button, we can see that there is this on click here and it says list is empty. And so this is where we can tell Unity, hey, when onClick is run, when onClick runs, run whatever functions are on these in this list. So I'll kick plus to add a new function. It wants this, it says none object right now, so we need to tell it where this function is. This function is in my script called overlay controller. Where is overlay controller? I've attached it to my canvas. So I'm going to go to button close. I'm going to drag the canvas onto it because the canvas is where that script is. And where it says no function, I'm going to click on that. I see my script here, overlay controller. And if I look through these, I see there is a function called close panel. I'm going to click that. And now let's just check it out when I run this. When I click this stickers, because stickers has a listener to it now, which is that open panel function, it's going to open the panel. It's going to set it to true. And when I hit the X button, it's going to close out of that. So those are just two separate ways of running functions using Unity's UI. Let's take a look at one last thing, which is going to be this slider here. You can see we just added the slider and Unity is already letting us just use it, so that interaction part's set up. But we need to use it in code. Let's just quickly take a look and see how we can do that. So just For testing, I'm going to make a function. I'm going to make a function in here. And I will call it public void scale slider, because that's what the scale slider is. And I'll say changed. Now, when the slider changes, we don't just want to know if it's changed or not, right? The slider is a little different to a button. We want to know if the slider is changed and what its new value is. And this is exactly what the slider does when it runs its event. It will tell us that it's run the event, and it'll tell us what the current value of the slider is. And so whatever function is listening to that slider, it needs to take in some kind of number. In this case, it's going to take in a float, and I'll call it value. And for now, I'm just going to I'm going to debug.log value. And when we go back to our Unity, once it's done loading, I'm going to click on the slider. Same thing, just like we did with the button, add something to the list, drag in the canvas, and this time when I go to run the function, you could see that up on top it says dynamic float, and there's that function because I gave it that parameter of the float. So I'm going to use that function. In fact, if we look at what the event is called, it's called onValueChanged, and that means when the value changes, it's going to run this function. We'll hit play. And when I move the slider, we can see that this debug is changing. It starts at 0 if we look at the bottom here, and as I scroll up, it goes to 1. So this slider just gives us a value between 0 and 1. We can even see it changing in the inspector here. But anyway, that's been our setup. That's a very simple look at Unity's UI, but we've seen kind of the power we could have, right? We can take this UI and now have our code be affected by it. And, we'll see that again in our later videos when we start using this sticker and placing stickers onto the screen. Thank you guys for watching.